What's up, guys? Today I am going to be reacting to a Charlie Kirk video that he is debating on the topic of abortion with a student at this university. Just to kind of keep this brief intro, I would like to give my thoughts on it, commentate here and there on it. I do appreciate Charlie Kirk's boldness, as far as, self-proclaimed Christ follower himself. But yeah, let's get into it and hear what they have to say.
I wanted to respond to kind of a specific comment you made. I hope you'll be open to that. I do remember, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what university you did say this specifically at, but you did state that you believe that the Holocaust was not as bad as abortion. So in other words, you believe that abortion is worse than the Holocaust.
So they're both distinct evils.
Of course.
With some similarities. The Holocaust in some ways was far more evil.
Okay.
But as far as magnitude, the abortion crime is more evil. And I can explain more if you'd like.
Okay, sure. So I did do some research. It is found that 1973 Roe v. Wade was ratified, correct? And so one thing that you did fail to mention was that specifically numbers are just larger because abortion has been going on for a longer amount of time.
So I think this is a poor argument from her side. This is why the pro-choice movement will always crumble, because there's so many inconsistencies with that ideology and what she's talking about. But I have actually I've actually brought this up many times to people. I mean, since I think 2020 is when it got really crazy with abortion argument and BLM and COVID. So there's a lot of conversations that were had via social media or in person. I've said, also along with that, I've said that abortion is a billion times worse than slavery was. And you'll get people, riled up with that. You say, what do you mean? How dare you say that? That's crazy. That's bizarre. Same thing when I would say Holocaust, right? Holocaust was not as bad as abortion. People go crazy. So, in her situation, and this, what she's stating now, she is going to use, and I've heard this before, so she's going to say that if the Holocaust were to continue, yes, there's overall more abortions happening, more babies being murdered, let's call it for what it is, more babies being murdered than there was overall Jews being slaughtered. But that's not to say if it were to continue to go on, the Holocaust were to continue to go on as long as abortion has, there would be more Jews being killed. I think that's poor, right? Because it's praise God for any slaughter being stopped. So that's just, first of all, she's pro-choice, and you'll hear in a second that she's gonna dive into that. But yeah, so just don't let anybody tell you that, because it's just it sounds good, from their perspective, and somebody that's uneducated, it would sound good, but abortion is the same, if not, I mean, we can be consistent across the board. In the same way that Jews were called parasites, babies are called parasites. In the same way African Americans were called parasites, and hey, I know this looks like a human, it walks like a human, it thinks like a human, but this is a black person, or this is a Jew. I know this looks like a baby in this sonogram, but it's just an embryo. It's just a fetus. It's just a zygote, right? So in the same way, this is the argument that's being made by a lot of pro-choicers, and I think it's poor. I think it's, and you'll hear again, I'm going to start the video again, but you'll hear there's so many inconsistencies, and obviously Charlie Kirk tackles them as they go. And then there's a point in this video, I will say, not to kind of give a spoiler, but she does, kudos to her, she does realize what she's saying is inconsistent, and she apologized for it and retracts her statement.
If the mass genocide, right, that the Holocaust would have continued, it was about 6 million killed per year. That would have progressed to 12 million. That would have progressed to 18 million. But it was ended because, again, it's a totalitarian form of mass genocide. And so I wanted to ask you, when you look at the 93% of women who do get abortions, it's 58,590,000 that get abortions the first trimester, correct? And there is suggestive data that states that 12 weeks, of gestation, there is significant data that has said that pain receptors may not have yet been developed. And so that would mean that outside of the women who received abortions first trimester, it would be 88,200 per year after the first trimester that the babies are likely experiencing pain. I will admit to that. However, I am pretty sure that every single person in the Holocaust, which would have been 2 million per year, as far as the people who could feel pain, did feel that pain. And so I would like to ask you, actually, I think I would just like to tell you, I think that 2 million actual people, kids, grown people, people who were starved, worked to death, I think that is more significant than the 88,200 life forms, if you will. Because, again, 58,590,000 of them are probably not feeling any pain.
Okay, yeah, but a human life is a human life, regardless of how advanced it is or whether it can feel pain. It still has moral worth.
Right, but I found it interesting. You said it's worse.
So just let's just stop there, right? Like for a second, like that is the answer. A human life is a human life morally. Doesn't matter. I mean, her argument sounds like it's, hey, like you said that the Holocaust was worse. Remember, these guys have greater pain receptors than these babies that you're advocating for. But let's define, right, with this, like she's beating around the bush. She's focusing on, the Holocaust and the Jews. But what are we, in abortion, what are we killing? What are we taking out of the womb, right? We have to define it as human life because scientifically that's exactly what it is. So in that case, Charlie Kirk is responding saying, morally, a human life is a human life regardless of what it feels or not, right? And I've heard this argument before. I'm not sure if he makes this argument in this specific video, but I think a great comeback would be in the same way. I've seen many people probably have different feelings about what I'm about to say, but when it comes to, an elderly person that maybe is on life support, or somebody's on life support at all, right? Right, to you, it may not seem like they can feel anything, but biologically, still them being, breathing and obviously they're on life support, but not breathing on their own, they could still feel pain. Is their life less valuable at that point? Because she's trying to argue that, hey, these kids, you think they're less valuable than the abortions that you're saying that are worse than the Holocaust, these kids that were in the concentration camps and whatnot. And the answer across the board is a trick question, right? Like from her, she's trying to stage it as like, hey, like, are they not as bad as like, come on, like these were kids that were like, the age of your children, and it's a trick question. And I think we should be consistent across the board that all human life, right, is made in the image of God, number one. Number two is worthy of dignity and value and protection, especially the vulnerable, right? The ones that can't fight back, which that's why I think, it's such a powerful thing when somebody does stand up and advocate for abortion, and the abolition of abortion, because you're defending the innocent. And that's important, right? Like we want to make sure, in the same way you would see an 85 to 90-year-old lady in the street and she's getting beaten to death by two 25-year-old goons and they're like, beating her and snatching her wallet and her purse and whatnot. Morally, you would have the conviction, I guarantee you, whether if you're in Christ or not, you are made in the image of God. You have that deep down inside, that feeling where it's like, man, I have to help. I feel bad. You're not like, yeah, that's awesome, right? They deserve to do that. In the same way, we need to understand that abortion is the innocent and unjustified taking of a child that has the right to life because they're made in the image of God.
It's worse. So I think
some way, so it's worse in numbers.
Okay.
The Holocaust was worse for two other different reasons.
Sure, go ahead.
It actually eliminated such a big portion of Jewish population.
Absolutely.
Nearly half of all living Jews were basically vaporized. Mm-hmm. And secondly, there was an intent and an evil of trying to eradicate an entire religious people.
Yeah.
That is not unparalleled, but we've only seen that happen 4 or 5 times in history. Mm-hmm. But just to reiterate the point, mm-hmm. What maybe you could tell me, a 4-week-old baby mm-hmm. who may or may not feel pain. Let me take your argument and say the 4-week-old baby cannot feel pain.
A 4-week-old baby that's outside of the womb
in utero.
or in the utero.
In utero.
Okay, understood.
So what is the moral difference of that 4-week-old baby versus you?
Versus me?
Yeah, why do you matter more than that 4-week-old baby?
Because I have past experience. I also have future experiences. That baby, while it has future experiences, nope, shut up. Nope, you are incorrect. That baby does not have any past experiences. And therefore, I believe that, yeah, I've probably affected and impacted more people in both a positive and a negative way than that 4-week-old uterus has.
As you can see, and it's not to, talk bad about this young lady, but she's getting flustered, and she's getting emotional. And I think that, and I'm not saying that, even me at times, right? Like, me talking to my wife or me talking to a friend and we disagree about something. That's why I think it's so important to stay rooted in Christ, especially in your conversations and your debates. Be careful, especially you Christian, speaking directly to Christians, because we don't want to act upon the flesh. We want to walk in the Spirit, and we want to respond, educated, while, being bold, obviously, and being gentle. But in this case, you could see how it's not only her. I've been in conversations before with people that they lash out and they shut up and be quiet, whatever, and they start getting emotional. Because what Charlie Kirk says is correct, right? Like, why are you morally more valuable than a 4-month-old baby, right? I'd even go as far as to say, a year-old baby, right? Like, I mean, if somebody, for example, if you put this woman next to a 6-month-old baby, and one of them has to be killed, right? Morally, how can you defend the stance where your life is more valuable because you've lived, say, for example, she's 20 years old, you've lived 20 years longer than that 6-month-old baby. When you guys are both worthy of life, you guys, as far as like, you have the more value, and you guys both are deserving of a chance at life, right? I don't know. You guys let me know what you think regarding that. I just feel like that's, it gets emotional, I think, because yes, and she's a woman, so she's taking it very personally, and she's, and also she's surrounded by tons of people that are not agreeing with her. But I just feel like it's a big inconsistency, because it's true. Like, I mean, I think that's very easy to defend, right? It's like, hey, like, this 6-month-old baby, as soon as we see the baby in front of us, we're like, oh, so cute, let me hold him, let me kiss him, especially if it's a family member or whatnot, or even if it's my daughter, right, like that. My daughter's 2 years old. And I remember when she was born, even before she was born, when she was born, it became even more real. But I have to understand that from the point of conception, she was DNA, everything, numbers of hairs on her head were already assigned. Like, it's you have to be consistent. That's pretty much what I'm trying to say. And I feel like people get emotional when their inconsistency bubble gets exposed, and the light gets shined on their inconsistencies. It's very easy to do that. And you'll see, and we'll kind of dive into more how that gets pointed out here.
Sorry, not uterus, embryo.
Yeah. So just to make sure I'm clear,
yeah.
that your moral worldview is that people gain more value the older they get.
Not necessarily the older they get. I would say that people gain more value.
Well, no, you said that based on what they've done. So, like an 82-year-old has more moral value than an 8-year-old. In fact, usually,
no, because it depends.
Just to interrupt, the West actually was built on the opposite idea that we sacrifice the old for the young. But during COVID, we sacrificed the young for the old, and we actually inverted it. It used to be that the grandparents would fall on the sword so that kids could live longer lives. So I'm just trying to understand, like, and from where do you get that moral worldview? Why do you believe that?
Well, I wouldn't even say that what I'm arguing is that it's based off of how many people you know. What I'm saying is, realistically, if you are walking around, right, and you have a 4-week-old uterus, I'm so sorry, I keep saying uterus.
A baby in utero.
Or embryo, okay, in your stomach. And then you have, just take a 4-year-old kid, all right? There are more people who most likely know that 4-year-old kid. That 4-year-old kid has the ability to understand fear, the fact that its life is in danger, and so therefore there is probably there's probably more reason, right, to not terminate the life of that 4-year-old
Yeah, it's
rather than the
just-
life of the 4-week-old.
So there's so much wrong with that argument. So under that belief system,
Sure.
if by government decree they said let's eliminate the Down syndrome kids,
Do Down syndrome people still have the ability to feel pain, recognize fear,
some,
recognize
but
sadness?
but it's highly diminished. But just this is not a hypothetical
exactly.
actually.
Okay.
It's actually you must get an abortion in Iceland if you have a Down syndrome baby. You must.
Yeah, that's really terrible.
Okay, we agree.
Yeah.
Right, but why is it terrible? The abortion, it doesn't matter that much, right? It's just like it's like a clump of cells. Like why not just?
If it is going to directly impact either the mother's life or the baby's life, then yes, I do think that abortion is an important issue. I don't think the government should ever be able to come in and say, hey, you're required to have an abortion. In fact, the whole slogan for the pro-choice movement.
So when it comes to affecting the mother or the baby's life and all this stuff, I think people don't understand that those are not abortions. Those are procedures that, and they want to categorize it over abortions. They want to categorize it, that it's equivalent to an abortion. It's the same thing, or it's the title. So if it's banned, then mothers would be dying in the parking lot left and right. That's not true. Don't let anybody tell you that, right? Like, fact check them, because that is not true whatsoever. So I'll get a little personal here. I wasn't planning to share this, but I just felt like it's the topic. Not only that, but it's, the touchy subject of obviously having, it's not like a burden. Like having a child that has Down syndrome, it's still life, right? They're still valuable. They're still human life. And they're not bedridden and suffering every single day to the point where, like we're going to abort them, right? Like it's not justified still in this case. However, we have one child, and we found out we were pregnant in November 2024. Our anatomy scan, our 20-week anatomy scan with our baby, was a baby girl, or it is a baby girl. My wife is still pregnant right now. She's due in about 30 days from now. We found out it was a baby girl, and then our anatomy scan was on the beginning of April of 2025. Since we had a healthy pregnancy before, we went into, OB, everything was good, everything looked good on the screen to us. We went in the back room and thinking that the doctor's just going to come in and say, hey, everything looks great, and give us some tips. We've been through this before. The doctor comes in and she has this look on her face, and right away our stomachs just feel like they're 1,000 pounds. And so she pretty much lets us know that our baby has a extremely rare defect called anencephaly. And with this defect, the baby won't live past a couple hours after being born. At first when she told us this anencephaly, we stopped there and I'm like, okay, we'll deal with this. Obviously my wife broke down. I was like, I felt helpless in this case, because I'm like, I have to do something to fix this, right? Like, I'm my wife's husband. I'm like, look, we'll fix this. We'll make it right. We'll deal with this, And I looked it up quickly on my phone while trying to comfort my wife while the doctor was still in there. And I said, okay, well, what do we need to do? And she's like, I don't think you understand. They can't live past a couple hours after being born because of they have half of a skull. They only have they don't have the forebrain. They have the back brain, and they have like 50% skull. So it's a neurological defect. It only happens about 20,000 times a year across the world, and there's no cure, and there's no surgery, and there's nothing that can be done. I believe personally that God can do whatever He wants to do. I don't believe that God has to heal. I believe that also God uses everything for His glory, including this, regardless if I like the outcome or not. Obviously, I would like to see every doctor fall on their face and repent and turn to Christ, because I've never seen it happen before in this situation. We have been visiting the Johns Hopkins specialists, every couple weeks or so, and we see the 3D scan. We're seeing all this, we're seeing all of this in-depth, look on our daughter and how the skull looks and whatnot. And it's like just pretty much just like a miracle would be. Everything was just not there, and then it's there when she's born. I would love to see that. However, we truly believe that God has a purpose in all things, and you know, we will be grieving, obviously, and hurting, but we trust in God and we trust in Christ, and we know that He will be glorified regardless of the matter. However, what I want to bring up is that we were told, even in this case, so like for example, the first question I had for this doctor back in April when we found this out, I said, I would love to ask you this. And what's even crazier, I'm sorry to get off track, but what's even crazier, this specific doctor, she said, you know, I would love to share something personal with you guys. I myself went through this a couple years ago, and we're like, wow, like this is very rare. You went through it? She's like, yes, I went through it. My husband said it was the most peaceful 30 minutes that he ever had in his life, staring in our daughter's eyes. See, that broke my heart, because I'm like, what do you mean 30 minutes? That we just have a couple hours. Some babies die stillbirth, or some babies died during the delivery. They die a couple days after, possibly. You never know. But yeah, and she's telling us that she's went through this, and she asked if she can pray over us, and she was a Christian, which was amazing. So it's like God placed her as in that specific, you know, as such a rare, you know, a rare defect she went through, and she's pregnant now with a healthy baby, which is super encouraging. However, I will say that my first question, you know, was, is my wife going to be okay? If she carries this to term, right? Like, is she going to be healthy? Is her life at risk? And she said, nope, not at all. It's the same as a normal pregnancy would be. You know, she's gonna be a little swollen in the last few weeks, you know, and whatnot. So in many cases, you know, like for example, like we went to our John Hopkins specialist, and then they mentioned, you know, our first visit, they said, you know, you have the choice. I know Florida is a little muddy. This is him stating this. I know Florida is a little muddy when it comes to the abortion laws, but me and another doctor, we could probably sign off and get this done for you. And me and my wife both looked at each other, and we said, absolutely not. We will carry this baby to term, and we will call her by her name, and she is made in the image of God, no matter what. And we will allow God, no matter what, we will allow God room to do whatever He wants to do. Regardless if He heals her or not, it's still human life. She's still kicking. She's still sucking her thumb in the womb. Like our anatomy scan, where we found out this news, our daughter was sucking her thumb. She's kicking every day, right? So going back to this, my wife's life is not at all at jeopardy. And if it was, and if it's like, hey, like, you know, we have to remove the baby, or if the baby does pass and my wife's going to get an infection, and you know that we have to perform this procedure where we remove the baby, or your wife's going to lose her life, that's not an abortion. That's removing a body, right? At that point, that's already deceased, that we've already understood that they have no heartbeat, right? So it's completely different. So I wanted to share that because, and it's not to say, you know, like it's not to throw a sympathy party or anything like that, but it's also just to put things into perspective, right? Like my first thought was, is my wife's life in jeopardy? You know, will she be harmed during this process? And you know, it was unequivocally across the board, no. Even with the John Hopkins specialist, he said no, not at all. Nobody's died, to my knowledge, from this, and he said that he's been dealing with this for about 20 years or 15 years. So yeah, so let's hear what else she has to say.
It is your body, your choice, and I know you're going to disagree with that, but that is the whole point. So what it's saying is it's not left up to the government to decide if they should or shouldn't get an abortion. In Iceland, yeah, that's a problem because it's entirely left up to the government, but that's an issue.
Let me take it to another extreme, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because this is full freedom, right? So you're saying, hey, my body, my choice.
I'm actually saying for the first trimester. After that,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's just say this is a different moral argument that I'm interested to have you play around with.
Okay.
Should it be legal if a mom finds out she's having a girl,
okay,
but she wants a boy? Should she be able to abort that 3-week-old?
Yes.
So it's just my opinion. I felt like she said yes because just to like, I feel like at this point she's trying to stay consistent, but she just realized, obviously you hear the crowd reaction, but again, these are all people that agree with Charlie Kirk, to be fair, and that worldview, most of them, I'd say. And so she's trying to stay consistent because she just realized, wow, I just got myself in trouble. Like that's crazy. And you'll see that she does admit how crazy that is. And she apologized for it, and she retracts her statement. But yeah, that's what's crazy is that, she's almost forced to say, yeah, you can customize the baby. You should have every right to customize your baby. And it's just the most craziest thing if you think about it. Like, I can't even think of a situation where that would be justified. If you want a girl and you end up finding out it's a boy, it's one thing to feel disappointed in that moment. I get it. We're all humans. Where it's like, man, like I wanted a girl, But it's like, hey, I'm going to abort the baby and I'll try again until I get a boy, What happens if you get pregnant with a girl again, right? It's just such a wild, disgusting, perverted worldview. And unfortunately, I don't believe that she's the only person that thinks that way, which is sad. I mean, there's some people that are even more progressive and liberal, I'm sure, than she is, that has even more of an extreme worldview when it comes to this.
Think about it. Think about what you just said. Think about what you just said.
Why?
Can that child directly survive outside her body?
Well, eventually, yes. I mean, again, so we talk about stages of development. Mm-hmm. What is the first step of human development?
I mean, obviously, it's whenever the two pieces of DNA,
the egg and the sperm
correct,
meet,
yes,
right?
and then they collaborate.
So
and
therefore,
there you go.
if human development begins at fertilization, conception,
sure.
So then shouldn't the human be protected at conception?
Well, I don't even think it's going to be protected if the baby is going to be born to a mother who's like, well, dang it, my kid's not a girl, it's a boy, or vice versa, then I don't even think they should be born to that parent in the first place. So,
but just to
sure.
understand, so what you are arguing for is eugenics, just so.
She's trying really hard here to justify what she just said, and you'll see eventually she realizes how silly it sounds. But yeah, like, oh, well, if somebody wants a girl and they end up having a boy, like they might as well just abort them because they're going to be so miserable and so hateful towards that boy when they're born. Like, what kind of response is that?
So we are clear. It is not just illegal. It is grotesquely illegal what you are talking about, which is sex-selective abortion, basically where you get a DNA result at 3 weeks, and you could be like, nope, not the hair color I like, terminate it. I wanted a boy. So basically, your view of pregnancy is no different than customizing a Ford Explorer.
No, my whole point, again,
No,
is
you got to emphasize on it. Your view is that the baby, if all of a sudden you get a blood test that you don't like, that it's, by the way, you could tell a lot of your baby's DNA test now. How tall it's going to be, its average IQ, brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes, whether it's going to be likely overweight, obese, whether or not it's going to be a boy or a girl. So if you get anything that you don't like, you say, my body, my choice, get it out of the shopping cart.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, it's very ethically problematic, yeah. But if we have advanced to a society where that can happen, number one,
yes, no,
we're
I mean,
already
you get
we're
blood
already
tests.
in pretty big trouble if we can literally say, okay, the baby's gonna have blue eyes, green eyes.
No, it's not. We're already there. We're there. So it's just so you understand. It's.
I mean, you can look at a Punnett table, but it's not actually going to be actually defined.
No, it's very defined. You could get a 3-week-old blood test, and you could tell right around 3 to 6 weeks almost everything with a very, very high predictive correlation of how your kid is going to operate.
I don't know how accurate that is, and it's not saying that I'm disagreeing with him at all. Like, I just don't know. I do know our first child that we have now, 2 years old, we were able to find out the sex at probably like 14 weeks. I don't know, something like that. Maybe a little bit earlier. I don't know if it's 3 to 6 weeks. That seems really early, but if that's the case, I mean, even that, it doesn't matter. It still doesn't justify anything. But yeah, it's just like you can find out super early, and it's, yeah, let's just get back into it.
Grow. Now, of course, there are some issues with it, but the sex is highly, highly accurate. You take the urine of the mom, within 48 hours you could tell. So what I want to make sure we're clear. You came here asking about the Holocaust. I'm going to complete the full circle. What you just talked about, sex-selective abortion, is Nazi eugenics philosophy, which is that we will eliminate those that we don't want.
Interesting.
Right. So again, I love how he did the first full circle, because as we talked about in the beginning of the video, in the same way we had people looking at black people as parasites, as Jews as parasites, we have people nowadays normalizing, which I'm praying to the Lord that this one day will be behind us, just as well as slavery is, and just as well as the Holocaust was. And we look at them like parasites, and that is a Nazi, worldview, right? Like that was Hitler's main thing. Like, hey, like let's reform this and get rid of this specific group. This is what's happening to babies. So yeah, I mean it's just the full circle, and again, that's why the pro-choice argument is so hard to defend. It's so easy to defend, as far as it's easy to like walk in Walmart, walk in Publix, and find 100 people easy that agrees with pro-choice. But it's so hard to justify and actually argue the case compared to pro-life, because like sooner or later you're gonna fall flat on your face.
You're exactly right. You did get me on that one. Yeah, because I'm not gonna like sit up here and pretend that you got me on that one. No, realistically, like if we're really gonna full circle and I'm gonna sit here and think about it, no, you shouldn't be able to kill your baby just because you don't like the gender or whatever.
Fair enough.
Listen, and I apologize for taking it to that extent.
No, it's not your extent.
But hold on.
I want to offer you grace. Thank you for saying that,
You're
and I
welcome.
appreciate
But,
that.
Okay. But I want to say, as far as like if we are balancing the numbers, I think that the amount of lives that were terminated I think they are more significant as far as the Holocaust, because every single person did absolutely have the ability to feel pain than they were whenever it was the 58 million.
Fair enough. So here's our view, and we'll close with this.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that if there is a 3-year-old in the audience that has very few friends and might be living on some homestead, or a 30-year-old that's very connected and very wealthy, in the moral worldview economy that we have, no moral difference. If there's
because they're like directly living like outside of their mother's womb, whereas if you have
let me go a step further.
Okay,
if there's a 3-week-old in utero,
I mean, it's still leeching off of the mother's resources, so I'm not sure entirely how much of its own being it is.
Well, again, so you leech for the first 3 years of life. I have a 10-month-old. He doesn't hunt and gather. He doesn't go work.
But he's not directly attached to your, I assume, to your wife's body.
In order for his survival, he has to be directly attached to something. Somebody has to give the baby breast milk formula, or
formula. Yeah, but can it
or something?
Okay, so here's your wife. Here's the baby. Can the baby just be apart from your wife and exist
that?
At
22 weeks, yes. So for 22 weeks,
so
there
again,
is an umbilical cord. So what you say leech, I say give. The mom gives life to the baby.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not arguing outside of first trimester.
And
so
what
I
we
agree
say,
with you there.
and not even a religious standpoint, because the religious is easy. Just from a moral standpoint, we were all given life by a mom who gave us nutrients through an umbilical cord, and we.
So, saying the religious part is easy. I understand why he's saying that, because it is like when it comes to religion, it's like, well, thou shalt not murder, and we're justifying this as where it's the unjustified killing of a human being, so it's murder. But I actually think it's very simple. I think it's actually easier to debate an atheist or agnostic or an unbeliever regarding this matter than it is anybody else, because we have to understand first. You have to understand what's your worldview, right? Like that matters. It's like, well, that doesn't matter. That does matter, right? Like, who cares about anything? Who cares about rape? Who cares about incest? Who cares about a husband beating his wife senseless every day? Who cares about it? If in your worldview we are descendants of bacteria and fish, and we came here out of the virgin birth of the universe, out of nothing that came from nothing, and we're ending at nothing, and this is meaningless. All this is meaningless. I have no ultimate authority and foundation to stand upon regarding on what I feel is wrong or right. That's why I feel like that's really easy to have that conversation. Usually you'll get people flustered and emotional and they'll get mad. It's not to win the argument. I'm not saying any of this to win the argument. I think this is why it should always be brought to the gospel. And these people are doomed without Christ, and they have no understanding truly of what's wrong or right, and they have no justification for what they feel is wrong or right. So majority of the conversations I have, I kind of want to just say, who cares? In your worldview, who cares about anything? Who cares about defending abortion? Who cares about, like abuse and child abuse and rape and incest and all this stuff that you guys are so, who cares about racism? Who cares about that? You sound like a Christian that cares about more value, but technically, if you believe that, there is no ultimate creator and there is no ultimate foundation that we should follow, you're pulling that up thin air. And I've heard the argument where, that comes over time, like, moral conscience and right from wrong. But then that's a sticky argument to involve yourself in, because then you got to put yourself in another country that feels like cannibalism's okay. And it's the other side of the world and a random jungle. And now you have to fight for why you feel like what they are doing is not okay, when in their society, it's completely normal, right? It's completely normal to marry a 12-year-old little girl and the guy is 45 years old, right? So that's why it's important to know Christ and repent and turn to him.
All given life by a mom who gave us nutrients through an umbilical cord, and we should give that back. That is just the moral cycle of life, right? Which is that which is given, that which is much expected. And so, again, human development, irrefutably, even a pro-abort will say this. Human development has a starting point.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yes, we agree. And it's conception. And we can use all these different words. We can use fetus, we can use embryo, we can use little one, whatever.
Sure.
But it's all still a human being. It doesn't go from rhinoceros to human being at like 10 weeks. It doesn't go from crocodile to human being. It's
Right.
all human development. Therefore, using reason that we all have, if it's human development and it is a human being, human rights. The first of all human rights is the protection of life.
Interesting. But okay, so do you agree that, like, let's say you go into a doctor's office, you have a 10-year-old and then you have a 22-year-old. The 22-year-old is going to be allowed to submit to more testing as long without parental consent than that 10-year-old or whoever I said was. So I don't know. I think honestly, it's again, and I don't know, like,
You have a lot of thinking to do about this, and that's okay. Because and this is not your fault, the pro-abortion worldview will collapse if you remove feelings and you remove hyper-emotionality. There is no defense using agreed-upon Western reason, which you believe in, and Western morality, which is we don't kill people smaller than us. We do not eradicate those that are, just because they don't have as much money or as much worth. We believe in universal human equality, which of course you believe in, right? Universal human equality is like the overarching big Western ideal, and by the way, it's in our Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. If you believe in universal human equality, there is no room for abortion in that society. It does not exist.
well, I mean, okay, we can
No, I'm
say
just saying,
that,
it's
but
fine.
then-
You have a lot to think about
But
with
then
that.
we're gonna. I mean, I think you do too. But okay.
I'm happy
listen,
to. No, it's fine. I mean, I've thought about this my whole life. So
yeah. all
thank
right,
you
well,
for your
I'm
time.
thinking myself. Listen,
Yeah.
I appreciate you, Charlie. Again, I want to apologize about what I said earlier about.
It's fine.
About
when,
that comment
when we cut
because
the video,
it's-
we'll put your second answer as well as your first one. We'll be fair to that. Okay. Thank you very
Sure
much.
you will. All right.
No, I will. I'll just be honest. Thank you.
All right. So I love the last part that he said, that it's true. Like, without feelings and the hyper emotional reaction that abortion gives people, it'll fall flat in his face. That's kind of what I said earlier. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Until next time, peace. God bless.